Hi everyone, my name is Faizah, and join me today as we talk about market research fundamentals with Dr. Bimpe Ayeni. Hi, how's it going?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So, let's tell us about who you are.
Sure. So I'm a plastic surgeon by day, board certified here and in the U.S.
Yep.
And I wear a few different hats. So that's kind of my 9 to 5, and my 5 to 9 is that I am a mom to 5-year-old twins. My husband Ade is an important part of the story of Blair Jack, the skincare company that I founded. So I'm also an entrepreneur, and it's been fun to kind of wear these different hats and juggle all these different roles, because a lot of the skills and the talents and the ups and downs are all very complementary.
Really?
So certain things play off of each other from the different parts of whether it's my career or my home life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love how you humbly said a few hats. When sorry, large hats, many hats. So I guess, tell us how, what informed plastic surgery, what informed entrepreneurship for you? Walk us through that.
So, great question. I think plastic surgery, for me, I think surgery in general is the family business.
Really?
My father is a surgeon, so I'm a second generation surgeon. Wow. And it's funny because growing up, my dad was always the kind who would just say, make sure you are good at whatever it is you want to do. But that whatever it is wasn't defined for myself and my siblings. And in one of these very interesting twists of fate, I'm one of 5 children, and 4 of us are surgeons, 3 plastic, 1 orthopedic. So yeah, my 3 brothers and I are surgeons. And what's also very interesting is my sister, who's not surgical, studied business.
Wow.
And is a professor who studies entrepreneurship.
Wow.
So it's funny how sometimes, you get these full circle and very interesting moments life-wise. My mom is an educator. So it's funny how my sister and her sort of, have that in common, whereas the boys and I and dad have surgery in common. For me personally, plastic surgery was a field that I didn't choose initially. It almost in a way chose me, from the combination of loving being in the OR, loving the intricacy of the field, loving the patients, and the unique things they bring. So whether it's hand surgery, whether it's breast cancer reconstruction, that I do quite a bit of work in, working with women and working in women's health, I just really enjoy my work. And, being able to answer questions is an important part of what I do.
Yeah.
People come into me usually on their worst days. They're scared, they're nervous, they want answers, and to be able to use the many, many years of knowledge acquisition to help them is very rewarding. And it feels great to be able to have someone say, oh, I have no idea what's going on, what do you think? And then you make a list for them and you kind of work together to get to a solution. So I'm very fortunate that way.
Yeah.
It's been a good gig.
No, I love that. First of all, it sounds like you and your siblings are every African parent's dream. But I guess just with hearing, for me, looking at you right now, I can hear that passion in your voice, just with your dedication to your profession. And correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like there's been a lot of insights and learnings into being able to effectively talk to people and empathize with them.
Yes.
I can imagine it's really important for a doctor or surgeon to be able to have that soft skill.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So, you can have the most amazing hands, as we say in the field, where it's, you get into the OR and you can complete a surgery from start to finish successfully. But you really still need to have that top-notch bedside manner. And so I always take myself a step back and I say, listen, when I was a kid and I had appendicitis and I needed surgery, I was scared. I was, I'd never heard about this. Am I gonna make it? Somebody tell me something. And, being able to be surrounded by family that was wonderful, but a surgeon who explained everything to me and his team of nurses who took such good care of me. I always think back to that, how would you feel, if you're sort of in that situation where you're just really just scared.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important to be able to have a surgeon who gets it and who can communicate with you and talk to you, not talk down to you, but just really sort of help you feel like you're part of the decision, you're part of the team. And to convey from my point of view that, hey, we're on your side and our goal is to help you get better. So I always remember that when I have little ones who are anxious or nervous, or even adults, just that, you know what, you were there once, so don't forget that. But I think what I love about the job is just people come in with, you know, ideas about who their surgeon will be and what a surgeon looks like, and sometimes that doesn't look like me, and I love seeing that sort of shift or transition. I think some of the most fun days I have and fun experiences, on Wednesday mornings I have a hand clinic, and I usually see a few little ones, babies. And especially over the pandemic, where I'm wearing a hat and I'm wearing a mask, all they see are my eyes. And so I have to communicate using just that in my voice. And I just love seeing the transition. When they initially are very apprehensive, like, oh, stranger, don't know this person, she's talking to my parents, I think. And, you know, before long, they're sitting in my lap, they're drooling all over me, and I love it. I love it. So, I love the fact that people can come in one way and, you know, you see their transformation. You see them become more comfortable and, you know, leave a different way than when they initially presented. So it's, again, I feel very fortunate to be in this field.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess, like, you talked about not necessarily fitting the image of what a surgeon might look like, and really like being appreciative of like the initial reaction and like how like people like change their reactions. Tell me about what it was like for you early on, like dealing with that. Like, was there a sense of like, am I not supposed to be here? Like, how did you handle that?
Well, the beauty of coming from a family like mine is that the support was there from day one, you know, and that isn't just because I chose to be a surgeon, but, you know, before arriving at that, I had gone through every potential career. I mean, my family, kudos to them, because I was one of these very creative kids who every day it was something different. And no matter what,
creative.
oh, I wanted to fly planes. It was always something. And they would say, sounds great, go for it. Nobody ever said, like, what are you, like, you're scared of heights, how are you going to fly planes? They would just sort of go along with, you know, my ideas. They just said, well, yeah, she's creative. So I love that. I love that I always sort of felt that support. And that was very helpful as I went through my career. And, you know, I'm lucky that I had so many great experiences, positive ones, awesome mentors. But then even on the times when things were not positive, and I was told, oh, you know, I remember one senior resident telling me that surgery isn't for girls. And I thought, wow, that's A, offensive, but B, wrong. Because my brothers said I'm good at this and I can do it. My dad said I'm good and I can do this. So it's really interesting how you can quiet certain voices and consider that noise when the pervasive theme is you can do this and you've got this. And I remember that particular conversation when I was told that, oh yeah, you know, surgery isn't for you, calling my brother, my older brother Femi, and I said, can you believe someone said this to me today? And he's, you know, he kind of laughed and said, ha ha, but this is you. I mean, I know you're gonna do it. But he said to me, you know, the lesson here is think about how you felt when someone said that to you, and make sure that when you become a surgeon, and you're going to be a great one, that you never make somebody else feel that way. And I thought, oh, that's the lesson. Okay, I'm okay with that. So yeah, you know, it's my journey took me sort of throughout. I was a kid. I was born in Montreal, but my family moved back home to Nigeria, and we lived there for 7 years. And when I turned 8, my dad moved us back to Canada, but this time to Kapuskasing, so 10 hours north of here. Wow. Small town. We were the 7 Nigerians in town. There were no others. So that was a stark contrast on many levels. And it still was a really amazing opportunity to just get to learn about Canada, learn about other cultures, learn about ourselves and how, we adapt when things are so stark to what we know and what we're comfortable with. And I think for me, it's made me very good at being uncomfortable, where you don't really have any of the comforts of home. Yeah. So I can make home wherever, which is very helpful. From Kapuskasing, with the support of my family, I was able to really push myself. I went to Yale as a 16-year-old, first one to go to Yale from Kapuskasing District High School. Wow. And then that led me to Columbia University, where I studied public health and learned how to do research, which was great. Okay. And then came back home. I went to medical school in Ottawa, residency in Hamilton, fellowship at Harvard, and then started working at South Lake in Newmarket, and that's where I still work. And I just finished my term as the chief of plastic surgery there. Wow. So yes, along the way there were sort of, bumps, but I just always kind of held true to what it is I wanted to do. I defined what my mission was. And kind of stuck to it. So I'm very grateful for amazing mentors, incredible family support, awesome world-class institutions, a great circle of friends. So all of that has grounded me. Wow.
Wow, that is quite the journey. You've navigated different professional environments, like physical, like spatial environments, and like you've come out stronger as a result of that, correct? Yeah, so you had to deal with all of that, and then one day you said entrepreneurship.
I'll go throw it into the ring.
Yeah, like another challenge for me. Tell us like what informed, so you seemed like you became a surgeon, a successful one at that, but you decided to throw entrepreneurship in the mix. Is that how it happened?
Yeah. I'm trying to think back to exactly when I started to define myself as an entrepreneur, but the story of how Blair Jack, which is the skincare line that I founded, came to be. So probably about 7 years ago now, because Blair and Jack, our twins, are 5. So a couple of years before they were born, my husband said to me, I shave and then I get shaving bumps a few days later. And it's not just me, a few of my friends have the same issue. So I'm wondering, you're a plastic surgeon, you're always talking about helping people with skin issues in your work. Is there anything you'd recommend? Like, what am I doing wrong, A? And B, is there anything you recommend that I can use to help me with these bumps? Because these bumps are itchy, they're painful, they're raised. So I have to kind of wear a turtleneck or, try and find ways to camouflage and hide them. And I remember my first thought when he was telling me this was, this can't be. Like, how has he gotten this far and the world has offered him so little in terms of options? And so I thought, okay, well, the first step in doing research is, gather some field data. So I thought, you know what, let's walk through a few drugstores, because there's got to be something. There has to be. Yes. Yeah. Little did I know. So we went around and lo and behold, came up short. We really had not too many options. And then I started thinking like, wow, this is fascinating that he's, educated, has the resources, but there aren't options for men like him, men of color who shave and have this very common issue. So from a medical perspective, I knew what the diagnosis is.
What was the diagnosis?
Pseudofolliculitis barbae, or PFB for short. So I thought, okay, you know what? The next step in my sort of thinking was, well, I have a network of friends who take care of skin, who help me when I have patients that are challenging, whether they have had a burn or a scar from surgery that isn't sort of following the normal course and it's a little bit raised or itchy. I knew that one person I would speak to very frequently was a good friend, Miranda Taufik, who's a pharmacist, and she would compound So essentially like individualize compounds to the patient. So she would say, oh, why don't we try this to manage the itch, this to help with the color, that to help with, you know, the texture. And that's how we would come up with combinations for my own patients. So in a way, my husband became, you know, a patient. And so I called her. I said, hey, Miranda, my husband has this issue. What are your thoughts? And so we kind of went back and forth. And by that point, I was looking at the research as well to sort of see, you know, what are the newest options for treatment and management. And that's how this all began, was really just focusing on the individual, being my husband. And so she sent me, I'll never forget, she sent me this white plastic tube with, you know, my name and his name on it, saying keep in fridge, and said, let me know how things go. So I thought, okay, no problem. So we did just that. He tried it, and, you know, didn't really hear much. Couple of days went by, 3 or 4 days went on, and then he comes to me and he says, this really works. And that was a bit of a shock to me, because my husband isn't someone who would tell you whatever just to make you feel good about yourself. He's very honest. And I thought, okay, I mean, he said this, and he kept saying it over and over and over, and I thought, well, this is interesting. And that's when I really started to think about you know, filling a gap and seeing sort of, you know, this need that I could identify in not just him, but many other men, and seeing how in this multi-billion-dollar industry, their needs weren't really being addressed. So then I kind of got to work and started trying to, you know, gather more information. And that came by way of, you know, his friends, others who had the same issue, people coming into my practice who would sort of mention it off the cuff, like, I'm seeing you for something, but by the way, you know, what do you think about? And that's how I kind of gathered the initial set of folks who were interested in trying our products. And with my background with a master's in public health, it's all about, you know, evidence. What's the evidence, and how do you do great evidence-based research? So that's, I mean, the early stages were all just trial and error, learning about ingredients, learning how to formulate, learning about cosmetic chemistry, something I didn't really know much about as an industry. So when you want to sort of scale, so you go from making just 130 gram compound to, you know, having more than that, you have to really build a team. So that's how things started. So of course life gets busy. I knew he had a positive response, and many others had the same great response. And then we welcomed our twins a couple of years later. So the twins came, our daughter Blair, aka Taye, firstborn, and a minute later her brother was born, Jackson Kinde. And so it's very interesting. The first iteration, I'm sure we were just very tired, but the very first name we had for the brand was Smooth. And we thought it was so clever.
Smooth, it's so smooth.
So smooth. And so then once the twins were there, and we had a little bit more time once we kind of got through the initial sort of, you know, excitement, chaos, we started thinking about just being more, I guess, serious about putting something together. And at that point in time, then, I mean, Blair and Jack was an obvious name for it, because at that point they were and still are the best things in our life, the best parts of our days every single day. And that's how Blair and Jack was born.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So your husband had a problem.
Yes.
You have or have a superpower, and you you put your thinking cap on, you leverage your resources, and lo and behold. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess for like the audience, could you tell us what the key unique value proposition of Blair and Jack?
So Blair Jack is a skincare line that is backed by, rigorous scientific evidence, which is what I bring into the picture.
Okay.
Every ingredient that's chosen, I've chosen for a reason. There's no fluff, nothing is in there just because. It's there for a purpose. But most importantly, it's effective, it works.
Yeah.
So people don't have time to sort of, try something on their face, which, it's such an important part of our communication and interactions. So I think we stand out for those reasons. This is not, fluffy. It works.
Yeah.
All of our products work and work well, and they're effective. And our goal really is to give men who are looking for a solution to their problems, a great set of solutions.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very well articulated.
Thanks.
I love that. So, kind of delving deeper into the research aspect of things. So you needed to understand how to formulate compounds or put things together and how it affects certain skin concerns and whatnot, right? But before that, you mentioned that you went to drugstores and found that you couldn't find a product to solve it. Beyond looking at drugstores, like how did you approach the initial search for what's available out in the market?
So for me, it was important to get an idea because there's always a lot of talk about the white space that's not filled. But I kind of wanted to get an idea of, okay, what else actually is out there? And that involved, I remember the initial phases, I would just order other products.
Really?
Yep. And try them one by one, just to put myself into the shoes, because I think it's very important to understand who that person, the target that you want to have become an ambassador of your product, who is that person? Who is he or she? Where do they work? What do they eat? What are their hobbies? What activities do they take part in? What do they read? Like, you want to know everything about them. And so I sort of wanted to get a sense of that. So yeah, we ordered lots and lots of other brands as products just to get a sense of the experience. From the unboxing all the way through to the actual use. Is it easier to use? What's the texture? Does it dry too quickly? What does it smell like? Do you walk around all day thinking, oh, I can't wait to wash this off? And all those little things really help to inform us in creating things for Blair Jack. And I think the one thing I always go back to is the fact that your customer or client, or in my case, the patient, you have to know them inside out. It's really important to know how to answer their question or solve their problem. And you can buy data, you can use all the various tools that we have, but if you're not aligned with what it is that they're looking for and how you can help them, then you're not really doing yourself or them any favors. So that's always the bottom line. What else have we done? I think building out the team was very important. Finding a cosmetic chemist, speaking with colleagues in the medical profession. So we have a dermatologist who we consult with, Justin Marson. He's based in the US. And I love the fact that he treats a very diverse set of patients. So he sees men from all parts of the skin spectrum. So I wanted somebody who understood the nuances of skin, of ethnicity. And so that's been very important, just to really have experts who aren't just great at what they do, but they know who the Blair Jack man is and what will be best for his skin. So yeah, it's been an interesting few years, lots of shifts and changes, and I think part of that is that I wanted our brand to be dynamic. I wanted it to be something whereby if something isn't working, based on speaking with men who use the products, well, then you have to adjust and be nimble enough to not take it personally, but to shift that. So I think, yeah, the most important research comes from two things. One is Not waiting till you have the perfect product. That's something that I had to
Really?
stop myself from doing, because I think many of us are perfectionists and you want everything to be 100% ready to go. You have to have a safe and a good enough product to unleash on the world. And so that was hard for me to sort of, to let go of this idea of perfection, because it's a delicate balance between perfection and then just wasting time. Because in that time, you can actually gather so much more information and data about your product by just getting it out there. And then part two is getting it out there. It's so important to have paid customers, and I'll tell you why. In the initial phases of Blair and Jack, we would give things out. So we had a lot of gifting to friends and family, which is wonderful. But your friends and family will say,
Nice.
it's nice. They love you so much that they don't want to hurt your feelings. Once someone's paying for something, that goes out the window. And they'll keep it real, so to speak.
It's my money.
It's my money.
My opinion matters.
Oh, yeah. So that's the real data. That's the real info. You want that. And you want that early, because it really gives you a sense of the truth about your product. And that was very important for us, just to really get a sense of like, okay, yes, it worked for, patient A, my husband, but what about everybody else? And that's been the best part, is once we started to sort of, make some sales and launch, and then we were getting feedback, it was wonderful. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because like I said, friends and family are wonderful and they'll support you, but you want people that are a little bit outside of that network.
It's a different kind of support that you're getting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So again, going back to what you mentioned about having a good enough product, what were some of the criteria that you defined as good enough based off of where you were?
That's a very good question. I think for me, good enough, in medicine we say, first do no harm. That was the most important thing for me. Nobody can get hurt by using Blair and Jack products, right? So making sure the formulations were great. We work with a partner, a lawyer in Ottawa, who's phenomenal, because she was able to give us a sense of just the regulations and the rules about how you classify different compositions. Is it a drug? Is it a natural health product? Is it a cosmetic? So even just learning that, so in a way the nerd in me loved that, just going back to school and learning about all these different systems of classifying skincare products. So that was very helpful. So for me, good enough meant that it was safe according to Health Canada's definition of that. And the rest I knew I'd have to take a gamble, a risk, and get it out there and then adjust. Because as long as it's safe, I'm okay with, tweaking with like scents and things like that.
Okay. And now, understandably, like our audience are probably coming from different industries trying to venture into entrepreneurship. And it sounds like you had a very nuanced approach to building out what this product is. Understandably so, it is a cosmetic product. But if you were to kind of simplify your approach, or I guess provide our viewers with a approach to trying to conduct some research to create a product, what might that look like?
Another good question. Questions have all been good. So I think having some kind of an approach is absolutely crucial. And what does that mean? To me, that would mean, have a question. What's your question? What question are you trying to answer? How will you answer it? And then what are the parameters that'll tell you you're on the right track? So what are your indicators for success? Meaning, getting your answer. I think definitions are crucial. Defining who is this for, whatever it is. Who is this for? This product, this service, this whatever it is you want to introduce. I think once you start there, then you're off to the races. I think it's very easy in the early stages to try and sort of, flow with the wind and, see I'll just see what people. No,
Yeah.
like you have to anchor yourself.
Yeah.
With the, what is my product or service? Why am I doing this? What do I hope to achieve with my product? And then, once you get that, then the other questions flow from that. It's like this sort of, tree diagram. But yeah, defining who your target is, I think is the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So, at first I thought, maybe, and it's very easy to get swayed. I remember speaking with some buyers earlier on that were US based, and they said, your product seems great, but so they said, why not this is great. We love the products and the story and the packaging, but just make it gender neutral, make it for everyone. And I thought, on one hand, you feel this pressure to conform. You're getting positive feedback, but you can't be swayed by one person's definition of what they think you should be doing. And so that was an easy no, because that's not, no. I know why I started this brand.
Yeah.
It was for, my husband, a man, and other men like him. And so that was very easy to sort of say no thank you to, because had I not, then I'd be going down another
rabbit hole.
Path, a rabbit hole, exactly, of changing everything, because now I have to think about all these other factors.
Yeah.
Whereas when you start with your definition of who it is you're doing this for, it makes it very easy to block out the noise and focus on the signal.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Yeah. So, okay, you've gathered these insights. So thank you for sharing, I guess, that approach that our audience could take. Understanding that it's important to organize and look back at your research and the work that you're doing. What sorts of tools did you use to support your research, or I guess gathering that evidence or gathering all the information that you received while embarking on that research?
So yeah, social media, I don't know a lot about analytics, but I've had to learn on the go. And it's just great to be able to, get such high quality data. And that's important as you sort of, start to scale and you start to really get a sense of who's coming to your site, the kinds of searches, what people are looking for, and just seeing if there's a match between what it is you're doing and what it is they're looking for.
Yeah.
And when you get that synergy, wow, that's quite powerful. But it's, it comes in so many different ways. It's the questions you get frequently in your DMs or in emails from the website, and finding ways to gather all that data.
Yeah.
Because none of that is it's all very useful. It's all very useful.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So I guess thinking back to the nature of Blair and Jack being a product that's dedicated towards skincare for men, essentially, right? As for me as a consumer, I can imagine that the market is pretty saturated, right? And of course, identifying your unique value proposition, the thing that makes you stand out, is important. But could you tell us a little bit about some of the unique things that you did to better understand what the market was like before deciding to even say I want this to be a skincare line for men, right?
Yeah, in the early days, I remember it was news to me that skincare was this billion-dollar industry year over year, consistently. And then I think when I really had a good amount of time to work on Blair and Jack was over the first few pandemic phases, where I wasn't operating because nobody was operating at my hospital. And so I had this time to really sit with data and sit with the information, and certain things emerged. Interestingly, one trend that we saw was something we call the Zoom boom, because all of a sudden we were all working virtually and communicating through screens, and people became very concerned about their facial appearance and their skin. And so we saw this uptick in terms of the searches for skin and skincare
Wow.
and treatments. And that's myself, my dermatology colleagues, my ear, nose, and throat colleagues. We all saw this across the board.
So
and
you were getting
globally.
reached out to by people, or like was this something that you
Yes.
saw like as like a report or something like that?
Both.
Really?
Yes. Lots of inquiries about things that we just hadn't really been seeing before. And I think, especially in my industry, in plastic surgery, I know for the longest time everybody thought it was something, if you're having any cosmetic treatments, it's because you're female. And that's not true.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a real change in the numbers with trends towards more men seeking plastic surgery, aesthetics, cosmetic procedures. So I think it's interesting how the two different worlds inform themselves.
Yeah.
So that's, again, great data. Good to see that. Good to be able to incorporate that in the work that we were doing.
Wow. No, amazing. So I guess like other than like the trends that you've identified or shared, were there any other like, I guess, patterns or pieces of data that you were looking or on the lookout for to inform your approach to Blair and Jack?
So yes, I remember working with our team and we just said very simply, what are men in a certain demographic in terms of age and, urban versus rural? What is a 30-year-old guy in Toronto looking for when he searches for skincare? And consistently, the things that would come up would be bumps, razor bumps, shaving bumps, very high on their searches. That was number one. So we knew we were sort of onto something.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, men who were a little bit older, so sort of, 30 and 40 and then beyond, lots were searching for bags under eyes or, eyes looking tired. And then men were also searching for skin looking dull, skin being dry and moisture. So, those were just with those three things alone, that really helped us to really narrow down, because we knew that for a brand like this, we weren't going to entice men with a 12-step routine.
Yeah.
That would be overwhelming, and they would say, yeah, sounds great, but no thank you.
Yeah.
So to keep things as simple as we wanted.
For your customer.
For our customer, exactly. Being able to focus on, 2 or 3 issues. Our hero product for sure was and still is the anti-bump formula for men who get bumps.
Yeah.
And the searches showed us that people were looking for solutions. So that was an easy way to see a fit with the market.
Yeah. No, amazing. And like, in looking out for like what men were searching for, and like the solutions for those, what were some of the products or I guess brands that you came across, and like how were you able to effectively compare and contrast what they were offering versus what you knew or thought Blair and Jack could offer?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are a couple. Everyone knows about Old Spice, but that was sort of more the combos, like the body washes and things
Body
of
and
that
face
sort.
wash.
Exactly, exactly. And I remember speaking to one of my colleagues, an anesthesiologist, who said, "Oh, good for you. You've done this great thing with this skincare line, but I just, use Head and Shoulders, head to toe." And I remember being horrified that he would admit this to me, but that's the reality of some, men's skincare routines. So, there are some great emerging brands that are doing great work. Lumen, Jack Black. But we sort of knew that we were different. We were different because of the ingredient selection, which really for me was just really going back to the basics when it comes to topicals that work, that are in the right concentrations and that work well. So you don't want to have things that cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And that was important with my cosmetic chemist, because of course you have to ensure that everything is shelf stable. So we did a lot of testing of our formulations to make sure that if someone forgets their product in their car seat, it won't all of a sudden disintegrate.
Yeah.
Or anything of that sort. And that's how we're able to sort of say, oh, forget about it. We we're getting a lot of information on forwards on the recent controversy with benzoyl peroxide, where some folks said, oh, at very high temperatures, it breaks down to benzene, and benzene is carcinogenic. So we know for a fact that's not true.
Yeah.
Because we know that men aren't microwaving their product before use.
Really?
For example. Or at least they shouldn't be. So, you know, you sort of are able to use your knowledge and be an expert in the field from all the years of learning about this, and then reviewing the literature, and then getting feedback from actual users, not from generated data, but from actual Blair Jack consumers. And that's how our goal is to grow, to keep on asking questions, because, you know, there's no shame in getting real data.
Yeah.
Some will love your product, some may not be fans yet.
Yeah.
And you ask them, well, why? Why not? And you know that, you know, the conversations that emerge from that are great ones.
Amazing, amazing. So of course you consistently need to ask questions and gather this data, but what would you say, like, how do you think businesses can adequately balance the need for comprehensive research when you're constrained by time and budget, limited resources? What are your thoughts on that?
It's another, you just keep, these are great questions. I think, you know what, just going back to what I was saying before, at the end of the day, being able to speak with somebody who's used your product doesn't take a lot of time and is not very expensive to either of you, right? And that's the most important information. That's like the best data out there.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we do randomized clinical trials in plastic surgery, is to get an idea of like a patient and, you know, what their experience is with a procedure or a compound, right? So I think it's very easy to overcomplicate things, and you're looking for data sets about millions, when at the end of the day, even speaking to an individual at that level, at that cellular level, is more than enough.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to just not lose perspective and to focus on that. Yeah.
So other than not losing perspective and really focusing on like truly valuable pieces of data, like what are some other common pitfalls to avoid when you're conducting research?
When conducting research, I think if your question is not specific enough, you'll get data, but it's not going to be useful to you or to who you're trying to reach.
Interesting.
Yeah. Your
And
question has to, you have to really narrow it down. So, for example, with Blair and Jack, we could have said, what are men all over the world concerned about when it comes to their skin? Which is okay. That's an okay start, but it's just too generic. You're gonna be pulled in so many directions, and you'll end up being frustrated because it's just too much. Yeah. Yeah. You'll be overwhelmed by the data. Yeah. But when you say, again, 30-something-year-old guy with curly hair texture, man of color, shaves and gets bumps. What are his options? What is he searching for? What has he tried that hasn't worked? And how can I help him? Now you're talking.
Amazing. Now, what's the difference between being really specific with the questions you ask versus being biased with those questions that you ask?
Ooh, wow. Okay. I think that we all come into the world with biases. I think having a lot of insight to be able to check your own biases is very helpful. But it's hard because, you are who you are and you think how you think. And so you think, no, I mean, everybody else should figure out what but it's true because sometimes you have to say, if you're able to answer the question ahead of time, then maybe you should be asking a different question, right? Because that may mean that you're sort of swaying things away from gathering the truth, and you're just sort of focusing on what your personal interests are. It's a good question, though. Yeah.
No, I could imagine, because I guess a common thing that most entrepreneurs would experience is they're really bought into the idea of the service or the product they want to bring to life, and you kind of lose sight of what's the actual problem I want to solve. And
Right.
by being married to that concept or the product or the service, you kind of forget that, like, is this solving the problem that I think it's solving, or is this just me, like, feeding my own ego on my product, right? So,
Right.
But,
I think having honest people in your corner is also very helpful. People who will say, that's not it. That is not it.
Yeah.
And mixed in with, I don't want to keep answering with the same question, but once customers start to pay, they like the level of honesty is like the next level. Because they won't just tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, they won't just tell you what you want to hear. You want to get your product out to the most random people in the most random corners of the earth. And then, you reach out to them and say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
And it's literally like no holds barred. They'll tell you stuff that I think is very helpful. And that, if you listen, which is another important part, it's very easy to say, oh, that must be an outlier if they don't love my product. Maybe there's something wrong with it. So you have to be able, and I think my work in my other areas is very helpful. I think being a parent is very humbling. I remember once making this delicious Thanksgiving dinner. My twins would have been about 2, so they were talking and fed them. And my little guy says to me, he tried stuffing for the first time. And I thought I'd done such a good job. And he says, Mommy, this is so yucky. Yeah, humbling.
Cut the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just being able to take that feedback. And the same thing in surgery. You do an operation, you think, whew, girl, you got it. Like you are. And the patient comes back and gives you feedback that's very real. And they may say, oh, I would have wanted X or Y or this done differently. And so being able to sort of take that feedback and not make it personal is an important part of just adulting in general. And also being an entrepreneur, to be able to really seek information knowing that it may not be what you want to hear, but this isn't about your feelings. This isn't about you. This is about something much bigger.
Yeah.
And I tell folks, like, Blair Jack is going to be a global brand, and I need to be able to hear from as many diverse voices as possible to get there.
Exactly. Absolutely. So now, I guess, in the pursuit of becoming a global brand, like, what do you think businesses, like, first of all, what is Blair Jack doing to stay aware and really on top of, like, what's going on in the market, and what do you think businesses can do to do exactly that?
We're very lucky, it's the amount of information that we have access to is a blessing and a curse, but I kind of focus on the positive and see it as a blessing. It's so easy to keep an idea, like keep on top of trends, skin trends, what's new, and I get all the the emails and messages just about this very thing. But I love it. I dive deeply, and like we're just surrounded. Forget about having to search, online for info. Sometimes I walk through, the grocery store, pick up magazines, ones that I, up until starting Blair Jack, didn't really buy. Men's Health, GQ, and flip through and see, what are they recommending? What are the experts who they seek to comment on different issues? What are they saying? What's new? So, I think those kinds of efforts are fruitful and are underrated. Like, you sometimes are like, what's that gonna do? But then you get ideas. You get ideas about collaborations. You get ideas about events you may want to plan for your brand. You get ideas about the next step, the next frontier. Gotcha. So I think, again, it's you have to be open to that, and that's what keeps you relevant and current. And then you're not a trend. You're a brand that will transcend time and.
Like, of course, like, really, what I got from what you just said, it's about really just staying as informed as possible,
Yes.
taking the amount of information available to you, not as a, this is overwhelming, but
Right.
like, what value can I take away from like this level of access I have, correct?
sure.
And also like putting yourself in positions where you may not necessarily be used to being in a particular environment, but you want to immerse the information in that environment for the benefit of your business, correct?
Absolutely.
No, amazing.
Yeah.
So like, what do you think are some common mistakes that businesses may make when embarking on market research?
When embarking on market, I think overspending. Spending a lot on having somebody else gather data for you when oftentimes all you need is right there. You have what it takes to gather your own information. Everybody, once you say I'm a business person, people will try and sell you all sorts of things and ideas, but oftentimes they have their own agenda. Yeah. And they have their own goals. So you have to kind of focus on, again, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who are you looking for? Talk to your team. Make sure your team includes many different perspectives.
Really?
You kind of want a little, because if everybody's just saying, yeah, sure, sounds good, that's great, that's okay. But I think it's actually better to have people who sort of challenge you and say, I'm not sure about that. So I think, having that diversity because otherwise you just create this echo chamber of people who just are praising you all the time, and that's not really growth. You feel wonderful, but then you sort of remain stagnant, and that's not doing you or the rest of the world or the business any favors. I think, just be very specific in defining your people, your niche, your product, what you want to do, what you want to achieve. And then always just have a way of circling back, looping back to see if you're achieving your goals. Are you getting good data? And if you're not, why is that? So you have to sometimes reinvent yourself, whether it means shifting your team. But these are the hard decisions you have to make as an entrepreneur, because you're always thinking on your feet. And it's important to make that decision. Don't be paralyzed with I don't know, I think this may not be working, or we're not gathering the right kind of data, but you get stuck in trying to sort of make others happy, when in reality it's like, no, you have to make sure that your team is working well for you and for your brand. So that's one thing that I learned maybe the hard way, is sometimes I hung on to certain ideas or certain sort of freelancers who were helping out for a little bit too long, because I liked them as people, but they really weren't doing anything for the brand.
Wow. That's a really important point to note.
For sure.
That made me pause for a second. But I guess to kind of, before we wrap up and like kind of close things off, like, what do you think are some important ethical considerations businesses should make when creating products or conducting research to create products for diverse audiences?
So the ethics piece, I think, can't be overstated. You have to ensure that the people that you're working with, that you align in terms of your values and the mission for your brand. So just really having a good sense of how information is being gathered. So for something in my industry, in skincare, it's, we made it, like from day one, it was very important to me that there was no animal testing with our products. And that's something that has been maintained throughout, even as we scaled up and we had options to. So it's just making sure you ask the right questions and ensure that your team aligns in terms of values with what your ultimate values are. So that's super duper important. Super duper important to me.
Amazing. Okay, so once again, before we wrap up, like you're just hitting me with all these like insights, right? I'm just wondering, like from what you've seen so far, and while like running Blair and Jack, right? What do you see? Like, do you notice any emerging trends in like how how businesses approach conducting research to find out more about their customers and their market, or? Yeah.
I think, you know, I've spoken with a few different groups that have been working with artificial intelligence, so AI as it pertains to dermatology and skincare. And this idea that you can gather lots of information and get all these different data points that we couldn't do 10 years ago. And I like how that's informing medicine as well as skincare. I like the idea. So to give you a very solid example of how that helps Blair and Jack, for instance, let's say my husband had shaving bumps. You know, he used the Blair and Jack anti-bump formula. He felt that his skin looked better afterwards. That is wonderful. That's what you want to see, right? But how do you define the outcomes? And how do you know that this is truly effective? And how do you quantify the effectiveness of the intervention? Intervention being the use of the product, right? So that's where the sort of the research in me from my past life comes in. So with AI, you have ways of, for instance, looking at a picture of him on day 0 and a picture at day 14, and there are ways to quantify and measure the number of bumps and quality of skin and how that's shifted and changed. So then that way, there isn't the bias of self-report, because like any good husband, he's supposed to tell me that what I've given him works. And like any hopeful wife, I'm supposed to see a difference in his skin. So it eliminates that, because you're just basically depending on the photos and what they show. And so that's, you know, another really important way to gather data. And it's a very contemporary way of doing things. And I think it's a wonderful tool. And I'm not one of those physicians or surgeons who's really worried about being replaced by AI, because at the end of the day, you know, these hands still do what these hands have to do. And beneath all that, it's the connection with the patient that matters. So I welcome AI and machine learning with open arms.
We love that. We love that. Now, just kind of like on the topic of AI, right? We know it as this like all-encompassing thing, this term that's being thrown out. But are you aware, like with the tool that you mentioned on being able to analyze the images, are there specific softwares or tools that like you've used or that you're aware of that you can kind of talk about a little bit?
So yeah, you know, I'm still myself, to be very honest, a novice, and I'm still learning. But I think, you know, that's the beauty of committing to a profession like medicine, this idea of being a lifelong learner. And the beauty of learning about AI is you can go from knowing nothing to knowing a good amount and being able to hold a decent conversation without there being a very long phase. So nobody has to go out and get a PhD in AI, for example, because we are so lucky to be exposed. There's a group called Skinopathy. And I've learned a lot about what they do, and they are using AI with regards to dermatology and different skin conditions. And so that's one example of a tool that's been very helpful, and I'm looking forward to working with them in the future. But there's so many that are emerging, and I'm learning more about them every day.
I think what I've kind of gathered from what you said, it's like, depending on what industry you're in, like those use cases will look very different, and you just have to really be as informed as possible based off of whatever your industry's context is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess now, with what you know now, where you are today, like what would you do differently and why?
Ooh. The good thing about failing and succeeding, often in rapid succession and having no time to really even process what's just happened is that it's all part of the process. I wouldn't change very much. We've had some big wins, you know, in 48 hours, I'm going to be at Times Square with Blair and Jack, the humans, to see the unveiling of an ad of Blair and Jack there.
That's amazing.
Yes, we're so excited.
Yeah.
You know, and I think back to, you know, even just a few months ago where I said to myself, why am I doing this? Like, you know, is there any reason to keep on going? So I think it's important to know that, you know, the ups and downs are part of the process, and you just got to keep on going and pushing through.
Absolutely.
And I think what I would do more of is focusing on the people that, you know, I work with, focus more on building out a team that really aligns with Blair and Jack. And that's taken me a lot of time to kind of figure out. But when I look back, I think the ultimate challenge that I've had is not everybody who approaches you should be a part of your team.
Really?
Yeah, not everybody truly understands the grit that it takes to start a brand from scratch. So it's important to be selective. It's important to also just get a sense, you know, I think I was very fortunate to have been chosen for the first cohort of BFN as an accelerator. Yes, yeah. And had this amazing team of fellow founders to work with and work alongside with. And I know in some of our sessions, we got a lot of really good legal advice.
Yeah.
So it's all those different things that have helped me really understand what team building really means, what skills I'm looking for. Most importantly, I think in the initial stages, the legal piece. You know, being able to understand contracts and knowing, you know, how when things are going great, of course, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if there are any challenges, being able to really understand what your rights are as a founder, and to find ways to, you know, create solutions so you avoid some of the pitfalls that we had earlier on when we first started. But, you know, I wouldn't trade it. There's one thing that I was doing in the early days that I found very helpful, which was journaling. And I don't life is busy, so I don't have time to write paragraphs.
Yeah.
But I would just kind of scribble every few weeks something that happened, good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah.
And initially I thought, you know, I wasn't doing it for any particular reason.
Yeah.
But then to go back a couple of years later and to read about some of those events, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And my husband and I, we laugh at some of the things that we've sort of had to do to get to where we were. So I remember one of those was when we had a TV spot coming up and we were trying to, you know, get our packaging just right. But then I knew they were just going to be using the product for a display, but I still wanted to make sure that, you know, in case somebody, it had to be just right. And I remember the plastic back then, before we changed to glass, came in, and I thought, I don't feel comfortable sending this out. So we actually used the twins, Blair and Jack's bottle sterilizer, to sterilize the containers, just so I would have the peace of mind to know that, you know what, they can use the products, even if it's only for display, that's fine. But I just didn't want to sort of, you know, let anybody have any bad or adverse events based on a sample.
Of course.
And so yeah, you look back and you laugh because that's when we were the ones doing everything and, you know, applying the labels and trying to get them as straight as possible. And now we work with a company that helps with that. So it's nice to see the growth.
Yeah.
And to remember where we started in the early days.
Yeah.
And to kind of, you know, keep pushing to know that if we started there and we're here now, let's now start planning for when we really, really get big.
Amazing, amazing. No, that was such a lovely walkthrough of your experiences.
Thank you.
It was an immense pleasure just hearing your story today.
Thank you.
Do you have any final words for our audience? Any piece of advice you'd give to any Black women just starting out, trying to kickstart their businesses?
Well, you know what? It's an amazing and a rewarding experience being an entrepreneur. I think it's important to know that you have exactly what it takes. Sometimes because the world wants to put us into a box or into boxes and define us and what we can do and the skills that we have. And what you're going to realize is that you have always had what it took. You're more than enough. Tap into your networks. Define your vision for your brand or for what it is you're creating, and go get them. It's not for the weak, but you're not weak, and you can do hard things, and you will excel and prosper.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.